So how exactly does the body move? Well, it moves where the muscles and the skeletal system, the muscular system and the skeletal system, can work together. Muscles are going to pull on bones. If you didn't have any bones, then basically anytime that your muscles contracted, you would just kind of quiver like a whole bunch of jelly, and you wouldn't get anywhere. It would be a waste of time and energy. If you didn't have any muscles, all you have was a skeleton, then you would just be this. And that would be a really boring life. So, yeah. But together, those muscles can pull on the bones, and those bones are going to pivot at certain areas that we call joints. Okay? Now, joints function like lever systems. There are 3 types of levers. There are 4 parts to a lever. There's the fulcrum, there's the bar, there's the resistance, and of course, the force. In a first-class lever, the fulcrum is in between the resistance and the force. That gives great power in exchange for a very low range of motion. In a second-class lever, the fulcrum is on one end, the resistance is in the middle, and the force is on the other. So the resistance is in between the fulcrum and the force. This is a great compromise, giving better range of motion than the first-class lever, but providing more power than the third-class lever. In the third-class lever, the fulcrum and the resistance are on either end, and the force is in the middle. This gives the best range of motion, but sacrificing tremendous amounts of power. So, in the body, those levers are located in different areas. As we go through the different joints, I will point out what kind of levers are functioning at that point. So, as these bones come together to form joints, there's actually 6 major types of joints that are in your body. Right? The first one is called the immovable joint. All right, this is where you have 2 bones that come together and they fuse into one bone. Thus, they can't move, which is why they call it the immovable, because okay, you get it. So, this would be like the bones in your skull. When you're an infant and you're born, the bones aren't fused together, allowing some flexibility to help mom out during birth. Be thankful for your moms. And then those fuse together when you're older and form a permanent bone that we call the cranium. Same thing happens to your hip bones. With the ilium, ischium, and pubis, they're not completely fused together as you're born, but as you mature, those bones become more solid and rigid and form a permanent structure. Okay, so these are immovable joints. Then you have a couple of the lesser known joints. You have these gliding joints. The gliding joints. Gliding joints are like in your carpals or in your tarsals or maybe between your vertebrae. It's where you basically have 2 flat surfaces like this that are going to come in and they're going to allow a little bit of movement like this, but really not a whole lot of movement, right? It just allows a little bit of flexibility in areas that you're going to be bending a lot, okay? So those are gliding joints. Then you have a saddle joint. Saddle joints are amazing. You only have 2 of them in your body. It's that thumb and that thumb. That's your saddle joint. Saddle joint, I like to describe it as being the Lego hand joint, right? Because you have Lego hands like this and a Lego hand like that. And Lego hands go like this. Ha ha! Right? You guys have all played with Legos. You know what I'm talking about. So Legos come like this, and then this one can move this way, and this one can move that way. So a saddle joint only pivots on 2 planes of motion. So my thumb actually can only go like this, and it can only go like that. But if I combine those 2 motions together, I can get this. Okay? So that's the idea of a saddle joint, and you've got them in those thumbs. Then you have, let's see here, we talked about movable, gliding joints, saddle joints. Pivot joints. There's pivot joints in your body, and I bet you have no idea where a pivot joint is. I bet you can't even guess where a pivot joint is. Yeah, you get it. Okay, I was really, oh yeah, you get it. So pivot joint. Pivot joints are just like basketball. You got a pivot point that you can rotate around. So a pivot joint is where you can rotate. The second cervical vertebrae has a little projection that sticks out of it that allows for your head to do this motion. It allows it to pivot. Also in your radius, where your radius bone meets your humerus, that bone allows you to pivot your hand like this without having to move your whole arm. So those are examples of pivot joints in the body. So now we have immovable, we have gliding, we have saddle, we have pivot. There's two types of joints left that are major joints in your body, and these are the most common joints of all. The first one is the hinge joint. Now the hinge joint is like, it's called that because it's just like the hinge on a door. A door can open, a door can close. Open, close, that's all it can do, right? Your hinge only works in one plane of motion. Your elbow is an example of a hinge joint, right? The elbow can close and it can open, close, open. That's all it can do. And you think, no, it can do this right here. No, that is adding in motion of the ball and socket joint, which is the next one, up here in your shoulder. The hinge itself can only go up and down. I promise you, if you take your arm and just take your forearm and go that way with it, without moving this part of your arm, you're gonna be in a lot of pain. Don't do that. So that's the hinge joint, and it goes in and out like this. And the last one, of course, that I just talked about is the ball and socket. You've got two major ball and sockets. You've got your shoulder joints and your hip joints. Okay, this is where you literally have a little cup shape in the shoulder. It's in the scapula with the head of the humerus fitting in like this, and for the legs, it's in the pelvis. You have a socket, and you have the head of the femur that's sticking in like this, and that allows for motion around, up and down, circular, angled, all different kinds. That ball and socket gives you incredible flexibility as far as range of motion. Now, all of these different joints function, as I mentioned before, on lever systems. Okay, you only have one first-class lever in the body. Remember, the first-class lever has the fulcrum in the middle, and the resistance is out on the end, and the force is on the other side of the fulcrum. So the fulcrum is in between the resistance and the force, okay? And that is your elbow. So you've got your humerus that comes down here, all right? And it's gonna articulate right here with your ulna. Now your tricep is gonna be the muscle that pulls this way to straighten out your arm. That's your tricep. Now your tricep sits, if this is your tricep, you've got your humerus that comes into a little cup-shaped area right here, and sticking out of the back that you would feel right there is your elbow. That is called the olecranon process, okay? Now that olecranon process, the tendons that attach your tricep to that olecranon process are on the outside of the fulcrum, which is where your humerus comes in and meets your ulna, okay? It's on the outside. So you have the tricep pulling, then you have the pivot points, and then the resistance is whatever you have in your arm out here. So as this muscle flexes and pulls that way, it straightens my arm, right? And that gives me a first-class lever. That's the only first-class lever that you have in your body, okay? Now, second-class lever. Remember, in a second-class lever, you have the resistance in the middle, and you have the force, the resistance is in the middle, and you have the force on one end and the fulcrum on the other. Now, the best example of this, you have two second-class levers in your body. One is your ability to nod your head, because most of your head, the mass of your head is here. It pivots on your vertebrae, and the muscles are back here on your back. So, the mass is here. Most of the mass is actually outside of where your vertebrae is. So you have your vertebrae where you're pivoting on the atlas, the first cervical vertebrae, because it's underneath your head. Most of your mass is actually off-centered beyond and in between where those vertebrae are and the muscles in the back of your head that allow you to do this. So nodding your head actually is in the second class lever. That's not the best example. Best example is when you stand on your toes. The ball of my foot acts as my fulcrum. The mass is my body above my ankle, and the force is being applied as my calf muscle, my gastrocnemius and my soleus, as those muscles are pulling on my calcaneum, the heel bone, as they're pulling on that to lift me up. And they do that by means of the Achilles tendon. So going up and down on your toes, this is an example of a second class lever. Now, everything else in your body are third class levers. Everything else. So even flexing my arm, the pivot point is here, the attachment point is here, and the resistance is there. So the attachment, the force is being applied in between the fulcrum and my hand. So that is a second class lever. Kicking my knee straight out. If I go like this, whoa, like that, and kick my knee out, right? That is a second or a third class lever. I've got the quadriceps muscle. All right, the pivot point is the tibia with the femur. The force is being applied here, and the resistance, of course, is down by my foot, so the force is in the middle. All other joints, moving your fingers, everything else, all of the joints are third-class levers because you always have the force in the middle. Now, this is important. You would think, I want all first-class levers because then I have power. Well, not really. See, the problem is that with the third-class levers, we have incredible range of motion. Right? That range of motion allows us to actually move at a reasonable speed. Okay? If I had all first-class levers, I could probably walk up to a door if I wanted to leave a room and just pull the door off its hinges because I am all first-class levers. Problem is it might take me 10 minutes to walk across the room to get to the door in a normal-sized room. That would be very inefficient. So the fact that we're mostly third-class levers give us this incredible range of motion. The reason that animals are so much faster than us when they run, not only do they have 4 contact points and 4 sets of things pushing them across the ground, but an animal, if you imagine a dog, in a dog you can see that the femur is actually way up next to the body, and then the tibia comes down toward the outside, and then you have the ankle bone. So what we view in dogs and cats and deer and other animals, what we're viewing as a backwards looking knee on their back leg is not a backwards looking knee. It is actually, that's their heel that's sticking way up off the ground, so they're way up on their toes. And what that does is that gives them this incredible second-class lever on their back legs that act as a force to propel them forward. Now remember, that second-class lever gives them that great compromise between power and range of motion. And that's what gives them the ability to accelerate and run as fast as they do. And those are the joints of the body, and that is how we can move.